So thank you for everyone being here. This is the Wellness and Legacy group where we are passionate of connecting death care professionals and breaking down the industry. Today, Probate Property Angels, that's me, got a haircut. I'm still the same girl, okay? Will be sponsoring and will be your host today. And we specialize in helping families with inherited properties, especially the overwhelming ones. We come in to make it a smooth and respectful process when it comes to the property being inherited. So if this is your first time here, first time watching this video, what our group represents is the death care industry. So we have realized there is an alignment of an industry that hasn't yet done a lot of talking with each other. As my background is in probate real estate, I started to realize what was happening before they inherited the property and what was happening after they inherited the property. So what we came up with as a group, as we started meeting collaboratively and really breaking down what were all the processes, we realized that effectively to prepare everybody, death is amongst us all. And when you work in post-death sector, you have a natural inclination to want to advocate for people to pre-plan, to not be in a crisis situation. And that's where we developed the pre-planning, basically, sector of the death care industry, which is preparing for one's, I was going to say demise. Sorry, guys. Okay. Preparing for the final destination. Okay. Which involves financial planning, estate planning, funeral planning, insurance planning, Medicaid planning. By really getting a hold of all that stuff can ensure that your loved ones and your legacy is a smooth experience. Naturally, after you think about the pre-planning, well, guess what? Now you start aging. Now all that planning that you did is now going into effect, right? So this is where we are currently focusing our mastermind sessions on right now, which is senior advisors, senior real estate services, home healthcare services, which we have the amazing Yancey on with us today that's going to give us a whole breakdown on that. And then we will continue our mastermind breaking down all of these sectors in the death care industry. Now, our group's goal is to create a seamless connection between the wellness industry, which serves individuals prior to death, and the legacy industry, which supports individuals and families post-death. What we've recognized is that both sectors often serve the same customers, sometimes simultaneously, and our group aims to develop a deeper understanding and collaboration across these critical stages so our service can unite as an industry together. Okay. So with that being said, we have launched the Mastermind of Industry Professionals, and which is what you're standing in right now. So we appreciate you being here live and we appreciate you watching the video. So without further ado, I will stop sharing my screen and I will bring Mrs. Chris Yancey to the stage. And okay, let me bring you on. Chris, thank you so much for being here today. Would you mind introducing yourself to the group and sharing a little bit of your background on how you got here?
Sure. Thank you for having me. Again, my name is Chris Yancey. My background is in physical therapy. I started in pediatrics and ended up going to geriatrics about 20 years ago when my children were little, and it provided me with the most flexibility to go into home health physical therapy. So about 20 years ago, I went into home health. I saw a need for a different type of caregiver than what I was finding in the home. I found that my patients, most of them wanted to stay at home, age in place, avoid going to a building if they could help it. Some of them were eager to go, but most people do prefer to stay at home as long as possible. So it took me a while to start a company because I knew the hard part was going to be finding that exceptional caregiver. But in 2017, I started First Coast Senior Care. It's actually was called First Coast R&R LLC, but now we're doing business as First Coast Senior Care. And then what I was finding was people were still having a greater need. They wanted to know who to use for hospice care, who to use when they needed to move, who to use to help them with their finances or get their estates in order, and all these types of things. And I was giving free advice, which was fine because I love seniors and I was happy to help, but I also saw a need for a different type of service. And so I branched out into it's called geriatric care management, but it's also synonymous with aging life care management. There was a an organization that has they're working on changing the name to aging life care. And so the main like our main company, our main I don't what's the right word I'm trying to come up with. The organization that supports us is called the Aging Life Care Association. So they're getting away from geriatric care management and calling it aging life care. So anyway, last year in 2024, I started First Coast Aging Life Care and now provide geriatric care management or aging life care management. So, and I'm happy to have the opportunity to talk about it because I think I was telling you off camera, I met somebody at a business type of happy hour who was telling me about the aging life care management. And I just kept thinking, well, that's what my caregivers do. I didn't really understand where the difference was, but there's a
Mhm.
huge difference. So hopefully we'll have time today to kind of break
Do
down what the main components are that I look for when we do the assessments and talk about how we help our clients. But is my
it.
dog really loud? Because I can kick him out of
No.
here because, okay. He's like shaking his frisbee and slapping it against his head, and that's all that I can hear, but he's relatively loud in this
No,
room.
you're good. You're good. Now that we're all work from home and, I think we're all COVID sensitive to Zooms and dogs barking now. So, thank you, Chris. I'm so happy to have you on. And I love having featuring guests like yourself that can really has a deep history with the industry. You've been through a lot of like transitions. For me, that's what happened too, is like once you get into it a little bit and you're like, oh, wow, there's so much opportunity for help, right?
Right,
These are people in sensitive situations. We all know that seniors can be taken advantage of. It can be tremendous burdens for the family. So it's a big opportunity to help, right?
right.
So I think to try to let's start breaking it down. So geriatric manager is, from what I think I heard you say, they're trying to change the terminology in the industry to now aging life care. Why did they take off the manager word? I'm just curious.
Oh, it's still manager. It's aging life
Okay.
care manager instead of
Okay.
geriatric care manager.
Okay.
So, for example, I have one lady who reached out to me and she had a mental illness. So she needed help at a much younger age than what some might consider to be geriatric. Or they have a traumatic brain injury or a spinal cord injury or Down syndrome or something like that where they might need care prior to the state of being considered geriatric. So, and geriatric is not the most polished positive marketing term either. So I think they're just trying to get away from geriatric.
Is geriatric, when you say just the word geriatric, is assumed it's a senior service?
Right. And it doesn't have to be.
Gotcha.
My specialty is senior care, so I'm still really focused on senior care. My background, I'm a board certified geriatric specialist in physical therapy. I'm a certified exercise expert for the aging adult. I'm a certified dementia practitioner. I'm MOCA certified. Like all of my professional umph has gone towards the seniors, and I really love the senior population. But, for business stability and job stability, I am open to taking some of the younger people. One of my new clients I just picked up, he died before I even finished his assessment, and I have another guy that I just started who's 98. And so his lifespan's pretty short as well. But I do have a couple of people that are in their early 60s that are having knee replacements and that type of thing. Their kids are very overwhelmed because, I mean, if you think about it, the children of seniors right now, they're still really busy with their own careers or their own children or their own hobbies.
Hmm.
And so they need somebody to help support them. And the good thing is this generation of the children of seniors, we're used to hiring people to clean our house or detail our car or do things that
Hmm.
that their parents didn't do. So,
Hmm.
they have a little bit of a different mindset of hiring somebody to help out with this stage of life. But
That's a great point. Yeah, because I think that's true. Everyone now is like time focused, so it's like if they can hire somebody to mow the grass, it's a win,
right,
you know.
right,
And I think that that must be, yes, it may cause, a financial investment that the family has to make or even the individual, but I mean, I could just imagine how much peaceful the relationship would be, and just how, because I've heard it just with my friends, our parents are getting older, and it's like, it's true. Like, you're heartbroken because you know that your mom or, grandparents need your help, but then you're still have so high demands with your kids, your husbands, your families, that you just live in this constant, like, never making it, you're never pleasing anyone, if you will,
Right.
so tell us, what does, historically, what does a geriatric manager do? What are the actual job duties of a geriatric manager?
Well, there are 8 key areas that we work with. So let me get to that page in my little notes because I have a hard time remembering some of them, but because some of
Mhm.
them are most frequently called in for, and others are kind of less urgent a lot of times. But the 8 key areas are legal. So, for example, making sure that they have their estate plans in order, that they have their advance directives in order, that we know how they want to be treated at end of life, that type of thing. Financial, a lot of people will tell you they have plenty of money, but then when you start digging into their finances, they have a decent amount of money, but not if they need in-home care because in-home care is very expensive. So I have a lot of people who say they want to remain at home, but when you look at the finances, to have somebody in your house 4 or 6 hours a day versus needing them 24 hours a day, it's much more affordable when you need that much care to go to a facility. Some people, they need to consider that and they need to move to a facility when you get to that breaking point. And other people, finances aren't an issue and they can afford 24/7 care at home. But it's really good to know where that tipping point is, where it starts to be a threat to their financial security to try and stay at home longer. Um, and also I help them pay their bills. I have this one lady that I'm helping now. Oh my gosh. She has been scammed and has 4 different companies that she is paying for extended car insurance on her car that sits in her
Oh,
garage most of the time.
poor lady.
So, yeah, so I've started helping her paying her bills and I'm looking at her bills and I'm calling these numbers, finding out what they're for. Extended car warranty, extended car warranty. I was looking at her Bank of America statement. She was charged $2,800 for a hot tub. She does not have a hot tub. I had to call and have that refunded.
Oh
Um,
my
we
word.
went to the bank and we had to have one of her checking accounts closed down because somebody also took money out and paid a huge amount towards Wells Fargo. That was probably their own personal credit card, not hers. So we're in the process of, you know,
Securing her accounts.
yes, yes. And in the meantime, people are wanting her to pay her bills and I'm waiting on her new checks and her new accounts. And, it's very overwhelming to her. People call and the sad thing is it's scam, but not fraud. So she cannot get her money back from all these years that she's been paying for this extended car warranty that she doesn't need. So anyway, financial can
Yeah.
get very, very complicated and deep. Health and disability, that's one of the things where I feel like where I spend most of my time. If somebody goes to the emergency room, I go in there with them, I talk to the doctors, and my background is medical. So my medical literacy compared to the average person's medical literacy is not the same. So I hear things that one, the senior wouldn't hear, but even if the adult child was there, maybe wouldn't pick up on and
Mhm.
help to facilitate the next steps. And I'm that squeaky wheel because, like, I had this one lady, she had a hairline hip fracture without a fall. So I'm like, well, we probably need to make sure she doesn't have osteoporosis or something else. So, I call the doctor who tells me to call another doctor who doesn't call me back. And, it's like the kids don't have time to do that. The lady had Alzheimer's, so she can't do that. So I finally get her appointment. We get the results from her scan, but nobody calls us about it. So I have to go into her portal to see it, that the results indicate osteoporosis and then run with that. So there's just so much that's dropped that the seniors don't keep up with and the kids don't have the time or the understanding to do. Um, Housing. So again, this goes back to if they're going to stay at their home, we might need to think about getting security cameras or a pool alarm or a fence around their pool. Sometimes it's just like, hey, their front entranceway is really uneven and we have to have their sidewalk torn up and replaced so that they don't have a fall hazard there. Um, Sometimes grab bars, a chair that will help them go up the stairs if they have stairs in the house. And you have to consider how much you want to invest in the home, depending on if the writing is on the wall that they're going to have to move in 6 months or 12 months versus if they're going to be able to stay there for a really long time. But I do a real thorough home safety assessment and make recommendations for housing changes. Number 5 of our 8 key areas is family. So a lot of times the family is not really agreeing on what the best course is for their parent. Sometimes they want to spend all of their money to make sure that their parent is well taken care of. But then there might be a sibling that's like, oh, let's not spend mom's money because I want it when she dies, So we have to deal with that. I have a lady currently who her husband is deceased, her son is deceased. She has one grandson who's 24, lives out of state, no pictures of him in the house, doesn't really know him that well, but he's her only living heir. She wants everything to go to him. So I've talked to her and I said, do you want him to be able to make your decisions for you? And she says, well, not necessarily, because he's already asking questions like, how do I get her car and stuff like that? And so we want to make sure that she has all the money that she needs to live on, and what's left goes to him. But she's not worried about saving money. But there are people that really, like, they don't want to break into their long-term care insurance because if they don't use their long-term care insurance, there's a cash payout and they want to hold off as much as possible. So, anyway, as you can imagine, there's a whole lot of family dynamics to work around. Kids often don't agree. And I can work as a mediator, talk about the pros and cons, weigh in on what I think is best, and then they ultimately can make their own decision. But a lot of times there's a lot of family mediation required. Number 6 is advocacy. I have so many examples. I keep trying to like pick some that stand out as the best, but advocacy, I had this lady that was in rehab. She lived at home. She lived by herself, was not using an assistive device, but she fell and her friends found her on the floor. She went to the hospital. Then she had to go to rehab. And in rehab, because of her cognitive impairment, they would not give her the freedom to roam around the facility. She had to stay in a wheelchair and she had to stay in this little area with all of these other cognitively impaired people. And she was just declining because she wasn't at home doing her laundry, fixing her meals, walking to the bathroom. She's in a wheelchair all the time. And so while they were saying, oh, she can stay longer, we'll appeal it and she can stay longer because she's not where she needs to be, I knew that if she went home, she was going to improve just because she would be doing her own activities of daily living and getting her own exercises. They also recommended that she would go to an assisted living facility in memory care. And I didn't think that was the best place for her either. So what I had suggested and advocated for was that she would go home. Initially, we did provide 24/7 care because she was very unsteady from sitting in the wheelchair longer than she needed to. And then once she got more mobile and safer on her feet, we're now there. We have caregivers in there 4 hours in the morning to make sure that she takes her medications and has meals, and then 4 hours in the evening for her evening medications and meals and make sure she gets safe in bed. And it's more cost effective. She is doing much better because she wasn't taking her meds before. And I'm her care manager also. So I take her to doctor's appointments that she used to miss because she didn't go to them and would forget about them and that type of thing. So, I mean, cognitively, she really is significantly impaired, but she has enough help at home that she can function that independently.
Mhm.
So, I mean, she's a perfect example of somebody who needed legal issues, financial, health and disability, housing, family, advocacy. I mean, that's
If
6 of the 8 so far.
Yeah, and I have a lot to ask you, but on that particular scenario, like who were you hired by, the individual or the family?
So, this lady that I was just talking about, I did an assessment on her last year in April or May. And the reason I was called in was because a social worker that I used to know from the home health world called me and said that this lady had had wellness checks called on her. The sheriff's department had been out multiple times because
Mhm.
she wasn't going to her doctor's appointments. So the doctors would call and say, hey, she's not showing up. It was just a cascading effect of people trying to help her. So I went out there and I said, you could really benefit from caregivers, but she didn't want caregivers. And I said, well, I can help you as a care manager. Make sure you're getting to your appointments. If you start to decline, we'll bring in caregivers, so forth and so on. She agreed to it initially. And then she said, "No, I'm fine. I don't need any help." She has her own rights, so nobody can make her get help. But I had, as part of my assessment, I had written down all of her upcoming doctor's appointments. So I knew that she had an appointment in about 4 weeks. It's funny that you ask, because this is one of these stories that just really, and
Yeah,
we didn't even plan this off camera, but this is one of these
right.
stories. So I had written down the date of her appointment, and if she did not go to her appointment, I was ready to call an attorney, get her guardianship, because I was really worried about this lady. So I called the doctor. She did show up for her appointment, so I let it go. But she lived in my parents' neighborhood. So I'd go to my parents' house every week and I'd always look in her windows and always think about this lady. A year later, this past March, her grandson called me and said, "I understand you're taking care of my grandmother." And I said, "Actually, I'm not, but I like to, and I worry about her all the time." And he said, "Well, she's in the hospital. She's had this crisis, blah, blah, blah." Again, if she had hired me the year before, we would not have the level of crisis that we had. I mean, for example, she has a cat. And part of my initial assessment is planning for the cat. If you go into the hospital, who's going to take care of your cat? If you pass away, who do you want to have your cat? That type of thing.
Hmm.
So, anyway, her grandson hired me, does not have the funds to necessarily pay me. So I'm not currently collecting money from her, but we have engaged an elder law attorney and we're working on getting guardianship for her. And once we get guardianship for her, then I'll eventually get paid for my services. But I'm much more concerned about the welfare of these seniors and to worry about, oh, if you can't pay me now, I'm not going to help you now. But she will end up getting guardianship. So to answer your question, the grandson hired me, but I agreed to not charge him and will be pulling from her estate once the guardianship is in place and mandates that it's necessary for her to have these services, which it
Wow.
clearly
Yeah,
is.
and that's really awesome that you find those creative ways, to help people
Yeah.
because like you said, if you couldn't materially sign up, then how are you to be hired and how are you to help and give care? Wow.
Right.
That's
Yeah. So I had to wait on him to hire me.
yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, that's
So
very interesting. Okay, I don't want to take us off track too much. So number 7.
number 7 is crisis intervention.
Okay.
So there's so many crises with seniors.
I was gonna say, does this like sum up the whole
Yeah.
crisis
And
intervention?
And I really should be hired for crisis prevention, so that when there is a crisis, because it is inevitable, that there's a plan in place. So sometimes the crisis is a hurricane, in Florida. Sometimes it's they lost their power because they don't know how to pay their bills or they forget to pay their bills. So you have to make sure that their power gets on. Sometimes it's they didn't take their medication, so they're having irregular heart rate or something that needs to be addressed, obviously emergency visits and that type of thing. And so with that, it's assisting with the transition of care, going from hospital to rehab to home or wherever the interim may be. There's lots of different paths to get from one place to the other, but it's a lot of steps. And a lot of times when you transition from the hospital to rehab to home, there's medication changes that need to be managed because there's multiple doctors prescribing multiple medications. They might change what you had at home. Like, for example, my mom is on metformin, but when she went to the hospital, they wouldn't give her metformin. They put her on insulin, and she's not an insulin dependent diabetic. So that kind of thing really confuses the seniors and their families, and the med changes are just
Mm-hmm.
out of this world. They're bizarre.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Bonnie's up there nodding. It's the med changes are very overwhelming and difficult to keep up with. So anyway, so it's crisis intervention. And number 8 is local resources. And I have been in St. Augustine since 1994. So I service St. Augustine and within about a 1 hour radius right now, but also, eager to hire more care managers to help me in a wider geographic location. But I know all kinds of people in the medical arena and outside of the medical arena, roofers, pressure washers, pool cleaners, people that'll cut your trees. And again, sometimes I have people with Alzheimer's. If somebody shows up to try and trim their trees, they may kick them off of their property. So sometimes I just have to be there to say it's okay for them to be here and let them on the property, or have a caregiver get them off of the property while I'm there to navigate that. But anyway, so local resources are important. And again, like my local resources are these people that are in this network with us, right? Because I need a financial advisor to help me understand what's going on. My lady that I was talking about that had all this scam and we had to change her accounts and stuff, I had to contact her financial advisor because she gets her check deposited monthly to her checking account, which we just closed. So
Mm,
there's no way she would have been able to contact them and manage that. So, I had to contact them and tell them the account was closed, get her some papers, so forth. So anyway, financial advisors, elder law attorneys to help me set up guardianship, estate planning attorneys, realtors, because there does come a time when a lot of them have to move, people that specialize in downsizing, um, people that they go into the facilities and say, okay, this is how much room you have. Let's look at what you have at home and how much you have space for, plan the move, sell what they can't move, that type of thing. Who else is in our group that is helpful? Um, Oh, funeral home people. I had my guy that I told you that died before I finished his assessment. His
mhm,
wife was very overwhelmed. I had to call the funeral home, get prices on cremation. I had to look at urns for her, that type of thing.
mm,
Um, moving specialist, Medicaid planners. A lot of people, it takes a while to get on Medicaid. And I have helped people apply for SSDI and Medicaid, but there are people that can do it a lot quicker than me.
mhm,
Same thing with Bonnie and the people that are helping as moving specialists.
mhm,
They are familiar with the different facilities in town and can say, oh, this is a better fit for you because you need this much space or you need some place where you can take your dog or whatever. So I will partner with those people. Instead of charging my hourly rate to do all the research, I'll just refer to them and they can help make the placement. Hospice companies, we have clients obviously that are on hospice and other home health care companies. So I no longer provide physical therapy. So if somebody needs physical therapy, I'll bring in another company that provides home health. Um, and although I do have my own caregiving company, we're not licensed for personal care. So if they need personal care, I'll refer to another company. And even if they are in need of companion care, I'll give them my company's name, but other companies to choose from as well, because that's only fair and ethical.
mhm,
So let's see, who else is in, oh, insurance agents as well.
mhm.
People sign up for all of these supplemental insurance plans that totally mess up their benefits from traditional Medicare. And I can't really go into that. I know we have a Medicare specialist in our group, and I think she did a recording, so I probably should go back and watch hers. But there are people that lose benefits that are excellent benefits because they go off and take another insurance. So
Mm.
we can have them assist in getting them back on the type of insurance that they need. Um,
Yeah, I think it's just, I mean, literally I think there should be like angels, like wings growing out of your back, like behind you right there. Like you're literally like, just becoming the family member that everybody needs,
yes,
know?
that's kind of one of the things that I when I was trying to come up with,
Slogan.
keywords and buzz phrases and stuff. I'm like, I'm a professional relative. And my best friend is like, no, Chris, a lot of people hate their relatives. You don't want to say that you're the professional relative. You need to come up with something else. But I do. I mean, I feel like I'm a professional relative, basically. So,
Yeah, like
yeah.
a like or maybe you should say the family member you wish you always had.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, because it's like you do this as a profession, but it's these are all, and I now that you broke all of that down, I understand like aging life care because
Right.
it is truly life, it's so like it's you literally have touched on every single component. Like I want to hire you to come run my life. Can you take over my life?
Yeah. And it's very broad. And obviously, there's some things that I'm not the expert in, like the legal stuff. I will definitely be connecting with attorneys on that. And the financial stuff, like I can identify where she's being scammed and where there's fraud. But when it comes to, some of the financial decisions, it's I need to refer to somebody else. And like I said, with the placement specialists and stuff like that. So I oversee all of it. I refer to people where it's outside of my scope of expertise, but collectively, have a great plan in place for them.
Mm-hmm.
And when I
What
do, go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask, what do you, and obviously this is your industry. How do people even find people like you, or is it information that seniors have that people like you exist, or
No.
okay.
No, a lot of people don't know that we exist. And it is somewhat an up and coming industry.
Hmm.
But yeah, I really need to work on marketing more and connecting with people more so that they know to refer to me.
Hmm.
Like I've met with some financial planners because when you work with seniors, they ask you to do the weirdest things. Like when I was a physical therapist and going into their homes, they lean on you for as much as they can possibly lean on you for. So I'm
Mm,
trying to get out to the professionals that deal with seniors and let them know that they can lean on me for pretty much everything. But
mhm.
it's really not very well understood. Um, we have the Aging Life Care Association has a website and you can put in zip codes to find somebody. But again, you have to know to go look at the Aging Life Care website to find somebody like this. Um,
So when do you think ideally, when would be the ideal time that somebody would connect with you?
That's a good question. Like some people definitely wait too late, like the lady I was telling you about, that a year later we could have avoided so much conflict. But when people start having a cognitive decline, that's a really good time. Obviously, before they had a cognitive decline would be great if you knew that cognitive decline was coming. If you see seniors that are in and out of the hospital frequently, they probably need more assistance in managing something in their life because there's no reason to have frequent flyers in and out of the hospital unless they, obviously have some chronic disease that is managed as best as possible, but that's still the inevitable result. But usually it's not. Usually it's because they're dehydrated or they're not taking their medications or they're not seeing their doctors or, they're falling, whatever. So they're, frequent flyers in and out of the hospital. If somebody has a concern about their parent driving, that would be a good referral for us. Um, but ideally, yeah, before. I have some people that I don't see every month, but I want to set eyes on them every month. So that's my minimum is to at least, see them so that we have a relationship. And when they go into crisis, they're comfortable with me being in the hospital with them, sharing information and such. Um, but yeah, it's really for if there is an overwhelmed adult with an aging loved one and they're starting to have cognitive or medical issues or difficulties managing the basic components of life and they're leaning too heavily on that adult child or the neighbor, then that's pretty much the time to call us.
Hmm. Okay. And because basically when they're having the cognitive decline or when they're having, in and out of hospital, pretty much like everything else just starts falling apart
Right,
around,
right,
right? Like their house, I go to a lot of, houses where people, obviously they've already passed away, but you could just tell like they just stopped trusting people. Like they didn't have the air conditioning guy come over. Like I'll hear executors, the kids tell me like I kept sending guys over here to fix her AC. She wouldn't let them in. Like, so they just like start, just kind of closing in, not allowing
right.
people to come in. And then that's where all like the problems start piling. And it becomes a huge problem. Whereas, someone like yourself can come in and kind of ease that. Um, how is so this is a privately paid, this is, so you don't run through insurance for a family to
That's
hire you, right?
that's correct. There are some long-term care insurance policies that may pay for the initial assessment, but they won't pay for the ongoing services.
Okay. And then, so you mentioned some patients, you're more like 24-hour care or very daily care, and some people once a month. How does that decipher?
Okay, so yeah, we're starting to blur the two businesses that I have. So people that
Okay.
have 24-hour care have my caregiving service. And
Okay.
some of them have both. Like I have I probably have 5 clients that have my caregiving services and me as a care manager. But if they have 24-hour care, that's the caregiving company. So my caregivers go in, we're licensed as companions, which means that we can do meal prep and planning, light housekeeping, supervision for safety, companionship. I mean, sometimes we've had people that just call us. You had this one lady, she lived right next door to her mom. They had a wonderful relationship, but she's like, I've heard the same stories my entire life. She's told me the same stories her entire life. I think it would be great for her to have somebody else to hear her stories with new and fresh ears. And so we would just send a companion over there and they would just talk and have lunch
Yeah.
together and take her walker and walk around the block. So sometimes it's as simple as that. So companionship.
What is a pro tip on that as a caregiver? Are you supposed to just pretend like it was the first time you heard the story, or are you supposed to be like, Mom, I've already heard this?
Well, that depends on your family dynamics. My family, you have to have really thick skin to hang around my family. So I would pretty much just be like, Mom, you told me that already. But when people have dementia, like on a different tip, if people have dementia, it's best to just go into their world. If they say that they went bowling yesterday and they've never bowled in their entire life, you just go with it. Or if they see somebody in their pool swimming and there's really nobody out there in their pool swimming, you're like, oh, I can't see them. Oh, what color are their swim trunks? And just kind of you go into their world.
That would scare me. Do you ever get scared in those situations?
No, but I've been around it a really long time. I mean, if people are agitated and angry, it can be a little unnerving, but hopefully they're appropriately medicated and don't get to that point. But it
Yeah.
can be frightening, but um yeah,
Because I
it's
think if I was a caregiver and somebody was hallucinating and stuff, I feel like it would just like, I don't know if I'd be able to handle it, you know?
well, a lot of times people are what we call pleasantly confused. And there are a lot of people that were mean, nasty people when they were younger and businessmen and that type of thing, businesswomen, and they turn into the very sweet, pleasant, lovely, older, demented person. And vice versa. We have some people that are really sweet, and then when they get older, they start cussing and they're sexually inappropriate. And people are like, my mom was never like that. I don't know what's happening, but it's the disease. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely it can be unnerving if you're not used to being around it. That's for sure.
Yeah, we're going to be speaking next week, I believe, with just going really deep into the care management, like the skilled and unskilled. And those were some of the questions I had was how do they handle, those situations? Because
Mhm.
you guys have to be put into some, when I go to families' homes, I'm seeing the aftermath, right? I'm seeing after they already had passed away, but I'm seeing the living conditions. And I was at a house not so long ago, and that thought came to my mind because the family had told me that he had, hospice in the house coming in, and I was thinking to myself, "Gosh, were the ladies having to work in this environment?" Because I guess people can live how they want if their house is how they
Yeah.
want,
Right.
but is that something regular in the industry? Just you deal with
Yeah.
people at all different.
Yes, yes and no. I have had clients that I have fired because they were nasty to my caregivers, but they
Mhm.
didn't have dementia. Like when people have dementia or Alzheimer's, you have a different understanding for the disease. But I have had people that were just downright nasty people that didn't have that. And I'm like, we expect to be treated with dignity and respect, just like we would you. And,
Mhm.
we'll step out. But with dementia and Alzheimer's, it's the disease and you try and tolerate it differently. But I will say, one of my clients, we have her 24/7. Physically, she's great. Like she can still get on and off the floor. She just climbed the lighthouse last month, but her Alzheimer's is brutal and she thinks people are stealing from
Did you
her.
say she climbed the lighthouse?
Yeah.
Oh, Lord help us.
Yes, physically she's amazing, but her dementia's horrible. She tried to get in the shower with socks on yesterday. She can't remember how to make coffee. Like she can't
Oh,
problem solve, so we're there all the time. Um, what was I going to tell you about her? What were we talking about?
yeah,
Oh,
we were talking
but her
about yeah,
personality, like
management.
she's becoming so belligerent to some of the caregivers that my concern is that she's no longer going to be able to get caregivers into the house And that may be her ultimate reason why she has to move. So I certainly don't want to encourage anybody to be over medicated to where they're, a zombie, but, and I don't mean but, I don't want to over medicate her, but we need to manage her personality and her anxiety and her agitation, or else she's going to kick all the caregivers out. Nobody's going to want to go back, and then she's going to have to move. And home is truly the best place for her because she does still do her laundry and blows her leaves and skims her pool and gardens and does all these things that are physically exercise for her. She does not want to move. If she's forced to move, she's going to have a rapid decline because she doesn't want to move. It's different when people want to move. They look forward to it. It's a good transition. If you don't
Mhm.
want to move, it's very, very difficult and it would be, her demise.
Mhm.
So, to answer your question, it can be a challenge when she starts insulting caregivers and telling them they're good for nothing and useless, and
Mhm.
she says some
Mhm.
horrible things and has had several of my caregivers in tears, frankly, including a man that I have. He was so
Oh,
embarrassed, he was crying, but she was pretty brutal on him.
yeah.
Yeah, but it's the disease and they all know that, but it does make it hard to go in
Yeah.
sometimes.
Sometimes it makes the work hard. Yeah.
Yeah.
So getting back, because I know me and you could just go down a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
So we have the caregiving service and the geriatric manager, and I think you're right. I was kind of blending them together. So just the geriatric manager is the management of all things in a senior's life.
Right. Those 8 things that I went over were like the key components.
Mhm.
With the companion care is to make sure that they have their meals and meds and they're changing their clothes and keeping their house tidy and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So it's a lower level of service.
Right. So hypothetically, yourself, you've branched out in your company, but geriatric managers as a whole typically would hire that care home. They would recommend, hey, you need to get someone in home care. Um,
Sometimes, not all of my care management clients have caregivers.
right.
Sometimes they just hire me to make sure that I'm accompanying them to doctor's appointments, that I'm communicating with the family, um, that I'm helping manage their bills and that type of thing. I go in and I do an initial assessment and I go over those 8 key areas. I do a cognitive assessment, a depression screening, a home safety assessment. We go over all their medications, upcoming appointments, and make a list of their doctors or diagnoses. It's like a 20-page report
Mhm. Yeah.
with short-term goals and long-term goals and recommendations and resources. And then they typically hire me to help them achieve those goals. But it doesn't always include you need somebody in the house to help out. Sometimes it's just, we just need to oversee
Keeping
to
up with
make sure.
everything.
Yeah.
So then, so you have an option where someone can just pay for an assessment. So you can just, a family can hire you and say, we want an assessment of our mom's situation. If you can help us understand, what we're dealing with, right?
Right.
And then they will decide to hire you like on a, I would say like like a retainer basis, almost like just like a monthly retainer that, and then do you do it by hours or is it, I'm sure you have different packages, but I'm just trying to, would like to offer the consumer like an idea of what this costs.
Yeah. So my initial assessment for a single person is $600. For a couple, it's $900. That's pretty much the industry rate in our area. Outside of the state, it is sometimes much more and sometimes much less, depending on where you're going. And then there's an hourly rate for care, different rates for regular office hours, weekend, holidays, and what's my other rate called?
Holiday
Uh,
in the
there's
middle of the night.
Well, that the middle of the night is after hours. I don't know. I'm totally blanking on.
Yes,
There's
that's okay.
anyway. So yeah. So then it's just an hour, and I bill every month because some people only need to see me like 30 minutes a month. If I have to go by their house to refill a pill tray every now and then, or um, doctor's appointment. Some people don't have
Yeah.
a doctor's appointment every month, so I just bill once a month. And some people I don't even see every month, but I do have that one little visit that I require so that I can at least keep our relationship and keep the rapport. So that's, a minimum of an hour a month.
Okay, and then once you do that assessment, maybe they will then tell you, we're handling mom's bills, so we don't need you doing that. But we do want you to accompany her in all the doctor's appointments and things. So based off of the different services that they would require, that's your billable hours of how you would service that family.
Right. I lost you for just a second because my internet froze, but I think you said that they determine what parts they want me to help with. Is that correct?
Right, right.
Yes, exactly. Like some people, when we identify that mom's not paying the bills, sometimes they'll just set up auto pay, so they don't need me to continue to manage the bills, but they might want me for doctor's appointments or to oversee the vendors that are coming in and out of the house, so mom doesn't send them away. But a lot of times the kids are out of state and so they can't be here if there's a sudden crisis. So they just want the parent to be familiar with somebody so that if they do have to go to the hospital, they know that person. And then, doctor's appointments pop up so that I would be familiar with them on a personal basis because it's kind of weird just to send a stranger with you into those types of more intimate settings. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
they'll pick and choose where they need assistance. And it's I make recommendations to like, get a phone that has the font where they can read it or get the life alert system. And so a lot of times they'll purchase those on their own. Sometimes people are like, I want you to do it, and I'll do all of that for them. It just depends on their time and their money, basically. And their
How long do you work with clients? I mean, what's maybe the longest time you've worked with a client?
well, that's kind of sad because a lot of times they die and that's why it ends.
But
That's the challenge of my business is the flux that we have. Like on my caregiving side of things, I've had people for, I think the longest was about 4 years before they passed away. Because, it's
Mhm,
really end of life care.
mhm,
So when I first started my caregiving business, I got clients right away because I was getting referrals from being in the home health field, but I had like 5 clients die in the first 3 months when I just got started. And my husband was like, "You need to be more careful about choosing your clients." I'm like, "This is end of life care. Like, I just don't know. And that other guy that I just did for the care management, and he died before I even finished his assessment. But they tend to call when things are more uncertain and volatile. So I
yeah.
would say that, 4 years in the caregiving side is probably pretty much the longest I might see somebody. But
What
with the
would you
aging life
say?
care, start younger.
Yeah. What would you say? Like, I understand the cognitive decline, like when you're talking about dementia, Alzheimer's, or, in and out of hospitals. I feel like that's already, like you said, end of life, right? That's already where you're kind of like permanently, not say terminal, but you're just, you're not going to get like, people don't typically get out of dementia,
Right.
they just typically, it advances, right? But what would it be like if people could get working with you before they get to that absolute end of life, right? Because at what age, I mean, you're very familiar with seniors, at what age do things just start naturally slowing down? You don't have dementia, you're fine, but just keeping up with life. I mean, I'm have a hard time keeping up with life,
Mhm.
like where would that age, like, do you see it like more like in like the 70s or
I would like to say in their 60s. Not that 60s are old, but those 60-year-olds are the ones that have the children that are overwhelmed and busy with their own life and can't help them keep up with things. Their
mm,
kids are usually in their 30s or 40s and they have their own children or grandchildren and they're still working and that type of thing. Um, but they're usually still feeling fiercely independent and like they can keep up with their own lives and may not want somebody getting in the middle of it.
mm-hmm,
So I do have a couple of people in their 60s currently. The
mm-hmm,
lady it's a husband and wife, and the lady has 3 kids, but they all are still working. One's in state, 2 of them are out of state, but she's pretty OCD and high anxiety and worries about her insurance bills, whether they're really being billed correctly. Her husband does not deal well with blood and that type of thing. So it's just kind of like a perfect storm of needing
mm-hmm,
somebody else there. And they're
mm-hmm,
only in their 60s. So hopefully I'll be with them for many, many, many years.
mm-hmm.
But I would say most people are probably in their 70s before they feel like they might need a little bit more assistance, but it's definitely
What
case.
is the average death age now? I mean, what is there for America? I mean, is it how long are people living? Are we living longer or are we?
Yeah, we're definitely living longer. I would have to look that up to be accurate, but I think it's in the early 80s now.
It's in the 80s. Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Because
it's older for women.
older for women, yeah. Those were smarter. That's
Yeah.
why. I was thinking, because like if somebody had your services like around their 60s, I think that they would even probably have just an overwhelming better life,
Right? Yeah,
yes, that should be something to be considered even with, when in our group, like with the estate planning attorneys and financial planning, they're working with people in that planning stage, right? Like before things get bad. Like so like I started in probate real estate, so it's like straight crisis. Like
mhm,
there's just here we are, And that's where we started looking, well, how, technically you should have thought about your house and you should have thought of how do I want my real estate to be transferred so that you don't end up in probate, end up in crisis. And so it's really those conversations are at large being had with financial advisors, with estate planning attorneys, is kind of what I see as the two main people. And then from there, it's being funneled down to like, have you spoken with someone for funeral? Have you spoken with someone for Medicaid to build
right.
in those, pre-planning components to make sure everything is well rounded. I feel like even having you as a resource to say, this is something that you need to look into, is having somebody, because the financial advisor, yeah, they're going to be looking over their stocks and their investment portfolio, but they're not checking their bills and making sure of all the things. And, it's that's the interesting thing is when we did our lunch last week, the topic was nobody does it alone, right? So there's no one in our group that solitarily does everything, right?
Absolutely.
We need each other. It requires a team, and I think advocating and getting this information out there, just like you said, even in my industry, right? People don't realize all the moving parts that come with an inherited property, And
Mhm.
even when the people are in probate and they're actually there, it's like it reveals itself like step by step, like which
Yeah.
is I'm very sure happens in your space. Like
Oh, yeah.
nobody's going to say that you're going to fall down and then all of a sudden break a hip and then all of a sudden not be able to care for yourself. And then all of a sudden, like those things just happen,
Right.
like people say, oh no, I'm fine. Everything's perfectly fine, And then you talk to them 3 months later and you're like, oh wow, well, my sister isn't participating and now the house is in foreclosure and we haven't got, and you're like, I said, that's what I was trying to
Right.
tell you.
Yes.
Right.
Exactly.
So advocating, having these conversations, I think is really going to help our whole industry to understand how to better age, how to age well, how to plan, what are the services out there. I always like to leave it, Bonnie, Holly, I know we have, do you guys have any questions for the amazing Chris? Um, I would always like to make that available for people that attend here live. If you guys have, I'd love for you. Bonnie, is that you?
Yeah, that's me. I just actually just have a statement for Chris. We used somebody for my dad in Southern California because he refused to let us go to the doctor with him. Absolutely. I don't need your stinking help. That's the nice version. So, and he couldn't drive by himself. So we had to tell him a cute little story because he wouldn't pay for anybody. He wouldn't
Right.
let us pay for anybody. So we hired somebody and said, Dad, it's under your insurance, your Medicare is covering this, and it didn't. So
Right.
he picked him up, and his cute little guy came in a BMW. My dad thought, "Wow, what a great industry this is! This guy's my insurance is paying for a BMW to pick me up." Took him to the doctor, took notes, emailed it. It is just such an. I have to give you kudos. This is a great thing you're doing. So it
Thank
really
you.
took the weight off us, and it saved
Yeah.
a fight
Thank you. Yeah,
And
we
then
have
have,
people that we fib about
a
how
little
it's
bit.
actually getting paid for and oh yeah,
Yeah.
insurance covers this
Yeah.
and we also like for the caregiving side of things, we use different terms like rent a friend or this is your personal assistant or whatnot, try and soften that as well. But yes, a lot of times we have to act like it's paid for when it's really not.
I was going to do it in California and I did cardiac rehab at the time. So I worked with all the seniors and I came home. I'm like, I'm going to start this business. I told my husband, and we're going to take them to the doctors. We're going to have dinner with them. I'm going to call it the old people gigolo. Yeah. He's
That's
like, no, you
funny.
can't call it that.
Yeah. Well, my 98-year-old that's in the hospital currently, actually, he just went to rehab. He keeps telling everybody that I run an escort service, that he has escorts from me. Then I'm like, yeah, no,
Oh my
not exactly. He's a
God.
riot, but yeah. He's like, I've been
So,
using her for escort services and now she's my care manager. So
Bonnie,
yeah.
I would like to, not, you're somebody, a consumer, right? That hired a person like Chris for your family. I mean, how did it change the dynamics, from a real testimonial point of view, from before you hired that individual and after? What was the difference in what did you see?
Well, one, it gave dad a sense of independence where he didn't have to depend on his daughters to take his damn ass to the doctor. He had that level of independence. It gave us the comfort level of knowing this 80-year-old man was not getting on the 91 freeway in California and taking himself to the doctor. And then we knew what was said. We had somebody
Mhm.
there listening with the clinical background, taking the notes. So it just really took that burden of a fight off of us three girls with dad, because he thought us three girls were against him. And so it kind of relaxed that relationship. It was just a treasure.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's the mediation, is such a big component. And even in what I do, when a family inherits a property and it's brothers and sisters, what you'll find a lot of times is the big brother doesn't want, little sister telling me what to do,
Mhm.
and big brother is not going to tell, so when we come in, it's kind of like this third party professional entity, that is setting the deadlines, is saying, what's going to happen. Families will literally go round and round and round over cleaning out a house, like
Right.
just because it's like you're supposed to do it. Well, you said you were going to come, and then you were going to do it, and then and oh well, he's good for nothing. He's never going to show up, and they will literally just get so stuck in that part, and so then when we come in, it's like, okay, guys, we're setting up a deadline, all the personal items have to be out by this date, the company's coming in. Now all of a sudden they're taking direction from the professional company, not from brother, not from sister, so that
Yeah.
mediation component is, you can't even put a dollar amount on it. It's hard to value it, but it's the mediation is what moves things forward, the advocacy at the doctor, knowing what to ask. I would have no idea what to say if my mom was ill, or I have no medical background. So whatever the doctor says, I'm like, okay. And then I'm going to go to Google,
Dr. Google.
ChatGPT it,
Yeah.
So yeah, so wonderful. Well, we'll go ahead and close up. Thank you, Chris,
Thank
so
you,
Thank
much.
Chris.
you.
Great.
Thank you.
Yes,
I
this
appreciate the
was so
opportunity.
informative. You've provided immense value to our group and our community, and thank you a million bazillion. Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. I'll see you guys soon.
Great.
Yes. See you guys
Have a good
around.
one.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.